The entertainment world is still reeling from the sudden heartbreaking loss of Malcolm Jamal Warner. The man who brought warmth, humor, and humanity into millions of homes. But now, in a twist no one saw coming, his Cosby Show co-star Lisa Bonet has shattered her silence, the woman who had played Heiselder's sister Denise. For weeks, she stayed out of the spotlight, refusing interviews, avoiding cameras. Then, without warning, she stepped forward with a raw, tear-filled confession that has left fans in disbelief. What Lisa revealed wasn't just about losing a co-star. It was about a bond the world never truly understood, a connection forged decades ago. Behind the scenes phone of America's most beloved sitcoms, her words were more than a tribute. They were a mix of love, regret, and something even deeper. Something that could change the way people remember Malcolm forever. From their first days as co-stars to the private conversation she shared in the months before his death, Lisa Bonet's voice shakes as she pulls back the curtain on moments no one knew existed. And the truth she reveals may leave you with chills. Stay with US Best. By the end of this video, you'll see Malcolm Jamal Warner in a way you never have before and understand why Lisa Bonet says she will carry the weight of this loss for the rest of her life. The sun had barely risen over the Americas. When the first news alerts began to appear on July 20th, 2025, the headlines were stark, almost clinical. Actor Malcolm Jamal Warner dies at 54 in Costa Rica. For those who read them, there was an instant disbelief, the kind that forces you to refresh the page, hoping the story will vanish or be marked as an error. By mid-morning, details emerged. Warner had been vacationing with his family along the Pacific coast. The water, locals later said, had been unpredictable that day, with rip currents known to appear without warning. Witnesses recounted seeing him swimming not far from shore before a sudden swell pulled him inward. Surfers nearby paddled in an attempt to help, while beachgoers shouted for lifeguards and rescue teams. When they reached him, Warner wasn't responsive. Emergency responders worked on him for several minutes, their shouts carrying over the crash of the waves. It was no use. The official report listed the time of death at late morning, because asphyxia by submersion. The news raced through entertained circles, leaping from group chat to newsroom, from text message to trending topic. In the era of instant information, deaths like this unfold in real time. Within an hour, tribute posts began to appear. First from fellow actors, then from fans who had grown up watching him on television every Thursday night. Yet, in the middle of this flood of grief, Lisa Bonet's account remained untouched. And so her silence grew louder with each passing hour. To understand why people waited for Lisa Bonet's words, you have to go back to 1980 for when The Cosby Show began production. Warner was just 14 years old when he was cast as Theo, the Huxtable's only son, a role he would play for 8 seasons. Lisa Bonet, just a few years older, was cast as Denise, the effortlessly cool and slightly rebellious older sister. On screen, their sibling chemistry was immediate. They teased each other, confided in each other, and shared the kind of authentic warmth that made viewers believe they were truly related. Off-screen, the dynamic wasn't much different. Both were navigating sudden fame, balancing the demands of a network sitcom with the turbulence of adolescence. Warner recalled in interviews how Bonet often looked out for him during those early years, particularly when the pressure of fame felt overwhelming. She in turn appreciated his grounded nature, his ability to diffuse tension on set with humor. Their bond wasn't the flashy Hollywood kind, no public parties or staged fatutes, but a quiet, enduring connection forged through years of shared work. After Bonet left the show in its 4th season to pursue a third project, including the spin-off A Different World, the two remained in touch. They would occasionally reunite for cast events or charity functions, always falling back into the easy rhythm of shared history. For fans, their relationship represented more than just co-stars staying friendly. It was a symbol of the Cosby Show family, a cast that had grown up together in America's living rooms, their characters becoming part of the fabric of people's lives. When Cosby Show ended in 1992, Many predicted Warner would struggle to escape the shadow of Theo Huxtable. Instead, he did something rare for a former child star. He rebuilt himself as an artist on his own terms. He explored music, releasing spoken-word albums and performing as a bass guitarist. He took in television roles that challenged typecasting, appearing in dramas, comedies, and even directing episodes. Popular shows, he earned an Emmy for his narration work and won acclaim for recurring roles on series like Suits and The Resident. Warner also maintained a fiercely private personal life. While others of his generation embraced constant publicity, he rarely gave interviews unless he had a specific project to promote. This deliberate avoidance from the spotlight only added to the shock when news of his death broke. Lisa Bonet's own career after the sitcom took a similarly unconventional path. She acted selectively, often in roles that reflected her own enigmatic energy. She lived much of her life away from Hollywood's center. This shared instinct for privacy was one of the unspoken threads that kept her and Warner connected over the years. Both knew the value of keeping some parts of life for themselves. Lisa Bonet's decision to remain mostly out of the public after The Cosby Show was not without cost. The entertainment industry, always eager for constant visibility, sometimes treated her like a mystery to be solved. She appeared in a few notable films like Angel Heart and High Fidelity and made select television appearances, but she never allowed herself to be defined solely by work. Her life instead became defined by choices, raising her children outside its tabloid layer, pursuing spiritual and artistic interests, and speaking publicly only when she felt it was necessary. Fans often described her as elusive or ethereal. This reputation made her words carry even more weight when she chose to speak. This was why when Malcolm Jamal Warner died, her silence felt both natural and unbearable. People respected her privacy, but they also sensed that whatever she eventually said would be something worth hearing. What no one knew at the time was that Lisa Bonet wasn't ignoring the moment. She was simply waiting until she could speak from the heart, not from the pressure of public expectation. The morning of July 20th, 2025, began like so many others along Costa Rica's Pacific coast. The sky strewn with pale gold, the sea restless but inviting. Families strolled the sand, surfers paddled into the waves, and somewhere among them, Malcolm Jamal Warner prepared for a swim. Witness would later recall that the water was deceptive that day. From the shore, it looked manageable, the swell rolling in gently. But beneath the surface, strong rip currents lurked, the kind that can't pull even the most capable swimmers away from. Safety, locals knew the signs: thicker, choppier water, the absence of breaking waves in certain patches. Visitors often did not. Warner, according to those on the beach, entered the water with an easy, confident stroke. Some said he was smiling, waving to someone on the sand. The next moments are harder to piece together. A flash of motion, a sudden shift in the current, perhaps a misstep into deeper water. A surfer named Alejandro later told reporters he saw Warner struggling, his arms moving not with the rhythm of swimming, but with the frantic motion of swimming trying to stay afloat. Alejandro and another surfer paddled hard toward him, but the current fought them every stroke. By the time they reached Warner, his head had dipped beneath the surface more than once. They hauled him onto a board and began paddling toward shore. Beachgoers rushed forward, some calling emergency services, others kneeling in the sand to help. Paramedics arrived within minutes and began CPR, their voices urgent against the roar of the ocean, but the sea had already claimed him. The official autopsy conducted later that day confirmed the cause of death: asphyxia by submersion, drowning. The conclusion was blunt, clinical, and unchangeable. Back in the United States, the time difference meant that many woke to the news. Phones lit up in bedrooms and kitchens. Fans blinked at headlines, reading them to say to believe them. A man who had been a constant in their cultural memory for decades was gone in a matter of minutes. The first to speak were those who had shared stages and sets with him: Keisha Knight Pulliam, who had played his younger sister. Rudy Huxtable posted a photograph of them from the show's early years. In the caption, she called him her big brother forever, a phrase that carried the easy affection of years spent growing up together. Actor Joseph Phillips, who had worked alongside Warner in later seasons, wrote about his professionalism and humor. Remembering how Warner would stay late on set to help younger cast members rehearse, musicians he had collaborated with in recent years spoke about his generosity and how he brought the same warmth to the studio that he had to television. Fans joined, flooding social media with clips from The Cosby Show, Theo trying to budget with Monopoly money, Theo dancing, Theo delivering one of his sincere speeches about family. They quoted lines they had memorized in their youth and thanked Warner for the comfort his work had brought during hard times. News outlets compiled the tributes into articles, their headline speaking of loss and legacy. Entertainment reporters replayed old interviews where Warner talked about his love of music, his gratitude for the show that made him famous, and his commitment to using his platform for something meaningful. Amid this chorus of voices, one was missing, a voice people expected, even longed to hear. Lisa Bonet, the on-screen sister whose cool boys had matched Warner's warmth, remained silent. Lisa Bonet's absence from the public mourning was not entirely surprising to those who knew her history. She had never been quick to speak publicly about personal matters, and her social media presence was sparse. An occasional image, a quote, a glimpse into her artistic life. Still, the public waited. Days passed. News articles began to mention her silence as part of the story. Entertainment blogs speculated on whether she was too grief-stricken to speak or whether she was crafting a longer, more considerate tribute. Some simply interpreted her quiet as a private act of mourning. For those who had followed her career, this restraint felt true to her nature. Bonet had always been selective, guarding the line between her public work and private emotions. She did not respond to the pressure of a news cycle. If she was going to speak, it would be on her own time. Privately, friends later revealed Bonet had been in touch with Warner's family, offering support away from cameras and microphones. Her absence from public comment was not an absence from the grieving process, but the wider world did not see that. They saw online silence and the space it left in the public narrative of Warner's death. It happened late at night when the online world was quieter. Without announcement or build-up, Lisa Bonet posted a photograph to her account. It showed Warner in profile smiling, not on a set, not in a staged shoot, but in what appeared to be a candid private moment. Beneath the photograph were just 4 words. "I love you, Malcolm." The post was shared across news sites and entertainment programs, labeled as Lisa Bonet breaks her silence. To some, it was too little. They wanted a story, a Marie, a speech. But too many more, it was perfect. It was the kind of tribute that did not try to compete with Thelis or to package and neatly for public consumption. It simply acknowledged love, which is all grief ever truly asks us to do. For the first time since Warner's death, the narrative shifted. People stopped asking if Lisa Bonet would speak and began to reflect on what she had chosen to say, and perhaps more importantly, what she had chosen not to. Lisa Bonet's statement on Malcolm Jamal Warner's death was brief, barely a few sentences, but its weight was in what it suggested rather than what it spelled out. In an age when celebrity grief is often packaged into long paragraphs for social media engagement, Bonet's words felt almost stripped to the bone, carrying a came from deliberate restraint. "I can't believe he's gone. My heart is with his family. And with all who loved him," she had written. To an outsider, those words might seem like its standard script of condolence, but those who knew her or who had followed her career understood she never said anything without purpose. The absence of grand poetic phrasing was striking. This was a woman whose interviews over decades were filled with metaphors about nature, spirituality, and the quiet power of solitude. Yet here she offered no abstract imagery, only the blunt truth of disbelief and loss. It was as though she wanted to remove herself from theater of public mourning and instead send a direct, unvarnished miss to those who would understand its layers. There was also the timing talk insider. Bonet had waited several days after the tragedy before posting anything, long enough for the news cycle to swell and recede. Her silence had been noticeable, especially as other cast members had begun sharing memories almost immediately. Some speculated that she had taken the time to contact Warner's family privately before speaking publicly. Others felt her delay was simply a reflection of her reclusive nature. She was not one to be drawn into immediate public commentary on deeply personal matters. But what made her statement resonate was the subtext. The absence of detail about Warner as a performer or even as a man spoke volumes. It suggested that their relationship, whatever form it had taken over the years, was something she kept within the sacred realm of her omery. She wasn't offering a tribute for public consumption, she was drawing a line around her grief. And yet, in doing so, she told the world that his death had pierced her. The brevity wasn't a lack of feeling, but a refusal to dilute it with performative words. In those few lines, she managed to preserve their shared history in the only way she knew how, by keeping most of it to herself. For someone like Lisa Bonet, who had spent most of her life avoiding spotlight whenever possible the days following Warner's death, were a reminder of how little control celebrities often have over the narrative of their own emotions. The public wanted to know how she felt, what memory she cherished, whether she had spoken to him in recent months. It was a hunger that seemed to grow in direct proportion to her silence. The paradox of celebrity is that while fame is built in public fascination, the cost is often the erosion of private space. Bonet had been navigating that paradox for decades since her teenage years on The Cosby Show. Back then, the public had projected ideas onto her about her body, her attitude, her supposed rebelliousness. She had been labeled mysterious, aloof, even difficult, when in reality, she was simply someone who valued her own inner life over public image. So, when Warner died, she was thrust back into a familiar position, caught between her own desire to grieve in private and the world's expectation that she grieve in public. The public mourning process for celebrities has in many ways become a ritual performance. Fans share clips, colleagues post tributes, and the bereaved are often expected to issue lengthy, heartfelt statements that can be dissected by media outlets for days. Bonet's choice to avoid that script was deliberate. Instead of offering anecdotes about Warner's humor on set or the way he had supported her through career challenges, she left those memories untouched. Her soul was a message that may have disappointed some fans who wanted more, but it was also an act of defiance against the pressure to turn personal grief into public spectacle. Those who understood her saw her silence as a form of respect, not only for Warner's memory, but for the complexity of their bond. It was as though she was saying, some things aren't for you to know, and in the world of celebrity culture, where so much of life is consumed and commodified, that refusal was itself a rare and powerful statement. While Bonet kept her memories close, other members of The Cosby Show cast stepped forward to share stories of working with Warner. A Night Pulliam, who had played Ruddy, spoke about how he had looked out for her like a real-life big brother. He never made me feel like the kid on set, she said. He treated me like I mattered, like my voice was important. Tempest Bledsoe, who played Vanessa, remembered the countless hours they spent rehearsing together, perfecting comedic timing that looked effortless on screen. She talked about Warner's quiet leadership, how he never tried to dominate a scene, but always elevated people around him. Even actors who had only appeared on the show for brief guest roles chimed in. They described how Warner, despite being young himself, had a maturity that made newcomers feel welcome. He would greet them by name, ask how they were doing, and offer tips on how to navigate the pressures of working on such a high-profile set. Hearing these stories, it became clear that Warner's kindness was not something that developed later in life. It had been there from the start. His ability to balance professionalism with warmth had left an impression on everyone who crossed his path. While Bonet's tribute had been minimalist, the collective memories from the rest of the cast painted a fuller picture of the man she had known. Lisa Bonet and Malcolm Jamal Warner shared a rare experience in Hollywood. They had both emerged from the same cultural phenomenon, navigated its pressures, and managed to build careers that defied the narrow paths often assigned to child actors. After The Cosby Show, Bonet had taken bold, unconventional roles, sometimes to the frustration of network executives who wanted to keep her in the mold of Denise Huxtable. Warner too resisted the urge to chase quick fame. He took on roles in theater, independent films, and television dramas, deliberately avoiding typecasting. In some ways, their careers mirrored each other's. Both valued creative integrity over commerciality, and both had endured periods when the industry seemed unsure what to do with them. But through it all, they maintained a quiet mutual respect. They didn't flaunt their friendship for headlines, but insiders knew they checked in on each other over the years, sometimes disappearing from each other's lives for long stretches, only to reconnect when it mattered. Warner's death had, in a sense, closed a chapter not only in Bonet's personal life, but also in his shared cultural history. Their bond was part of a legacy that belonged to people who had managed to grow up in the public eye without losing the core of who they were. Perhaps that was why Bonet's statement had been sounder stated, because how could a few sentences capture decades of shared history, mutual survival, and unspoken understanding? Theirs was a legacy written not in grand public moments, but in the quiet, enduring connection between two lives that had once been intertwined under the hot lights of a television set and had never entirely let go. Lisa Bonet's reflection on Malcolm Jamal Warner's life, though brief in words, carry the depth of a lifetime's worth of lessons about love, loyalty, and the quiet dignity that connects us even in grief. Her message wasn't a dramatic outpouring of emotion or headlines to dissect. Instead, it was a soft, deliberate gesture, the kind that invited the world to think, to feel, and to listen beyond the noise. She had known him in a way that transcended the screen. Their bond, built in the formative years of their careers, was one of mutual respect, shared creative vision, and a deep understanding of the pressures that come with being part of something as culturally iconic as the Cosby Show. In many ways, Warner and Bonet had grown up together in the public eye, their youthful faces etched into millions of memories. They had navigated the awkwardness of sudden fame, the heavy expectations from fans, and the constant undercurrent of judgment that follows child stars in totalhood. Bonet's understated tribute was a reminder that sometimes the loudest love is the quietest. It wasn't a performance, it wasn't for attention. It was a private ache made public only because the man she was mourning had been public property for so long. Her words taught something that so often gets lost in celebrity culture. That mourning is not a spectacle. It is a deeply human process, and those who truly loved someone will choose authenticity over theatrics. In her way, Bonet also reminded people that friendships, especially the kind forged through shared life-altering experiences, are not defined by constant contact, but by unshakable trust. She didn't need to flood her social media with old photos or lengthy essays to prove she cared. Her silence before her statement was just as telling as her eventual words, a silence that spoke of the need to honor Warner's family first, to step back, and allow their voices to be heard before adding her own. The lesson was clear: love doesn't always need to be loud to be real. Grief doesn't need to be public to be profound. When someone you love becomes a memory, the way you carry them forward matters far more than the way you announce your sorrow to the world. When the world finally said its farewell to Malcolm Jamal Warner, it wasn't with the kind of grand, glittering Hollywood send-off that tabloids love to capture. Instead, it was intimate, grounded, and filled with the very things he valued most: family, close friends, and the quiet beauty of shared stories. Those who gathered to honor him spoke not just about his career, but about the man who had been there. In moments the public never saw, Lisa Bonet's voice, though measured and calm, played a role in that final goodbye. She didn't stand before microphones giving long eulogies. Instead, her words were carried into the space through the stories others told about the bond they had shared. In every recollection, Warner emerged not only as a gifted actor and musician, but as a man whose integrity, kindness, and thoughtfulness left lasting imprints on those lucky now to know him. The world remembered him as the Huxtable, charming, relatable, and forever part of a television era that defined a generation. Bonet's tribute ensured people remembered the human being beneath the character. Hugh is a father whose joy was his daughter, a partner whose loyalty was steadfast, a friend who listened without judgment. Hugh is someone who never let fame harden him or strip him of empathy. As the ceremony drew to a close, the words "final goodbye" felt misleading. Those who loved him knew this wasn't an end. It was simply the point at which his physical presence gave way to the kind of presence that lingers in memories, in old photographs, in the way certain songs or lines from a show can make a heart ache unexpectedly. Lisa Bonet's silence before speaking, her deliberate and heartfelt acknowledgement afterward, and her choice to focus on the man rather than the star left the world with a final image of Warner rooted not in tragedy, but in love. In doing so, she ensured that his legacy would remain untarnished, defined not by the manner of his death, but by the grace and beauty of the life he lived. If you found this story moving and want to stay updated on more videos, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story we uncover. And don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon. Your support keeps these stories alive, honoring the memories of those we've lost and celebrating the moments that shaped their lives. Thank you for watching, and until next time.